Early morning, January 3rd, 2026, while most of the world slept, U.S. military forces launched what President Donald Trump would later call one of the most stunning displays of American military might since World War II. The target, Venezuela's Fuerte Tiuna military complex, and the objective, the capture of President Nicolas Maduro. By dawn, Maduro and his wife were in U.S. custody. By midday, they were on the USS Iwo Jima, bound for New York. And by Monday this past week, they were in a federal courtroom facing narco-terrorism charges. Maduro's defense, I was kidnapped. The U.S. response, well, you're a criminal and we're in charge. So why Venezuela and why now? Well, underneath all the geopolitical theater sits the world's largest proven oil reserves, 303 billion barrels. That's 17% of all the oil on earth, more than Saudi Arabia. But here's what decades of mismanagement did to Venezuela's oil industry. Production collapsed from 3.5 million barrels per day in 1997, when they were a powerhouse, to barely 800,000 barrels a day today. That's a 77% decline. The infrastructure is declining, and PDVSA, their state-owned oil company, admits their pipelines haven't been upgraded in 50 years. And the cost to rebuild, an estimated $58 billion. Trump's plan is simple. American oil companies moving, they spend billions fixing what's broken, they restart the wells, and the United States, Trump's exact words, will run Venezuela for however long it takes. Now, that raises two questions. One, can they actually do it? And two, what happens to the rest of the oil industry, to Nigeria, to OPEC, to global oil markets when they try? Let's find out. We'll take a look at what it means if Venezuela oil comes back. Right now, the world produces 102 million barrels of oil every single day, and demand is 101 million barrels. So we're already oversupplied. The United States pumps 13.8 million barrels a day, Russia 10 million, Saudi Arabia 9 million, then you have Iraq, Canada, and Nigeria, which is doing somewhere between 1.3 million barrels a day to 1.5 million barrels a day. On the demand side, China needs 11 million barrels every day, India needs about 5 million, and critically, U.S. Gulf Coast refineries, which are designed for heavy crude, also need a significant amount. Venezuelan crude, Nigerian heavy crudes. Nigeria exports about 15 to 20% of heavy crudes to the U.S. Before the collapse, Venezuela was America's third largest oil supplier, built for Venezuelan heavy crudes like the Phillips 66 and whatnot, and they all want that crude back. Nigeria and other countries filled that gap. Between January and August last year, Nigeria shipped 33 million barrels of crude to the US, worth almost $3 billion. We're actually Africa's largest exporter to America. Now, if Trump succeeds in restarting Venezuela and Venezuelan oil returns at scale, the question then becomes which markets face the most pressure. And here's what the data shows. About 80% of Nigeria's crude is light and sweet. Bonny Light, Kwa Ibo, and Akpo, which have API gravity of above 35 degrees and sulfur below 0.2%. These target different refineries than Venezuelan heavy, which sits at API 16 with sulfur above 2.5%. But roughly 15 to 20% of Nigerian production, grades like Escravos and Bonga, falls into the medium to heavy range at API 28 and 30 degrees. That's where the direct competition starts to emerge. So the impact potentially breaks down in three ways. First, approximately 200,000 barrels to 300,000 barrels a day of Nigeria's medium to heavy crude would compete directly with Venezuelan barrels for the U.S. Gulf Coast refineries. Second, even if Nigeria's light crude faces indirect pressure, when heavy crude floods the market, price differentials compress across the board. Light crude maintains its premium, but margins narrow. Third, and perhaps the most significant, refined product competition. Once Venezuela rebuilds refining capacity, their diesel and gasoline would target Latin America and the Caribbean, and these are some of the same export markets Dangote is positioning for. And this plays out against a backdrop of global oversupply. The International Energy Agency forecasts supply will exceed demand by nearly 4 million barrels a day this year before any Venezuelan contribution comes back. and there is a market impact on oil prices. When the US captured Maduro, what happened to oil prices? You'd expect them to spike, right? Military strikes, geopolitical uncertainty, and a major OPEC member in chaos. That's a textbook recipe for $80, maybe $90 oil. But instead, prices fell. Brent crude dropped to $60 a barrel, and Western Texas Intermediate $56, because the markets are significantly oversupplied, drowning in oil. The International Energy Agency actually estimates a surplus, an excess of 3.85 million barrels a day of supply this year. That's nearly 3 Nigeria's worth of oil with nowhere to go. And there are other factors driving that supply. American shale is still pumping record volumes. Brazil is ramping up production. Guyana, a country in Southern America that produced zero oil a decade ago, now pumps 600,000 barrels a day. And Libya is back online at 1.4 million barrels a day. Meanwhile, China, the world's biggest buyer, is slowing down. And in Europe, energy efficiency is reducing demand. Electric vehicles are accelerating adoption in Europe. So OPEC Plus held an emergency meeting after the Maduro capture for 10 minutes, and their decision was to do absolutely nothing, keep production frozen through to March. And that's because if they cut production to defend prices, say remove 2 or 3 million barrels for the market, prices might stabilize, but they lose market share forever. Customers will go to America, to Venezuela, to anyone still pumping. But if they flood the market to kill competition, crush Venezuela before it starts, or bankrupt US shale, oil crashes to about $50, maybe $40. And when oil hits $50 a barrel, the budget in Saudi collapses, Russia's economy might implode, and in Nigeria, we'd be looking at a fiscal emergency. So OPEC chose option 3, wait and do nothing. Hope the Chinese economy recovers and hope demand also recovers and catches up before OPEC is forced to make an impossible choice. So Brent crude, the benchmark for global oil, will average $60 to $68 a barrel this year, down from $75 to $82 last year. Now in Nigeria, our 2026 budget assumes $64.85 oil. We're already below that, and we haven't seen even Venezuelan barrels hit the market yet. Now, if Venezuela actually gets those oil wells flowing by 2027, if they add 1 million barrels a day, we could be looking at $50 to $55 oil. What does all this mean for Nigeria's position? Our current production is around 1.3 to 1.5 million barrels a day. After years of decline from theft, sabotage, and underinvestment, output in Nigeria is recovering, and Nigeria remains Africa's largest oil exporter to the US. 33 million barrels were shipped between January and August in 2025, valued at almost $3 billion to the US. However, many US Gulf Coast refineries were originally configured for heavy sour crude, the type Venezuela produces. If Venezuela supplies returns at scale, that $3 billion market from Nigeria could face significant pressure. And the cost structure also tells another story. Nigeria production costs are between $15 and $30 a barrel. Venezuela, once infrastructure is rebuilt, can produce at $10 to $15 a barrel. At $60 oil, the margins are workable for Nigeria. At $50 a barrel, the economics become highly challenging for the higher cost Nigerian fields. But Nigeria does have a strategic card, and that is the Dangote refinery, which has a 650,000 barrel a day capacity. It's amongst the world's most sophisticated facilities, capable of processing both Nigerian light and Nigerian crude. And the potential arbitrage, if Venezuelan heavy crude trades at $45 a barrel while Nigerian light trades at $60 a barrel, Dangote could import the cheaper feedstock, blend it, and refine it to premium products for other West African markets. So the big question is, what and how should Nigeria position itself, and what strategy should it pursue to continue to boost oil production amidst the global uncertainty?